As the owner of a private practice, do you really want every day you work to be as long and as hard as it was the day you opened your doors? I'm going to guess not. And my guest says it doesn't have to be that way, even if it feels like it does have to be that way. And he helps private practice owners work less while earning more. He's going to tell us how to get that done. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that usually what they want, but care is better when the provider owns the practice because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think are best. It's different when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, eventually, their agenda starts to creep in, gives the provider more to think about. Let's just get rid of all of that and help them stay private to begin with. My guest today is Jeff Russell. As a successful serial entrepreneur, Jeff teaches private practice owners how to unchain themselves from the daily grind by creating a practice that runs without them. Jeff gives providers a framework to follow where they can leverage extenders to work less and make more than they ever have before. Jeff, you're a busy guy. Thank you for coming on PracticeCare and opening our eyes to all this.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here, Carl.
Thank you. At the same. I want to start before we get into it, where I start with every guest. Your bio was quite brief. Fill in the gaps. Help us understand. Get to know you a bit better. How'd you get into all this? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, it's never a straight line, that's for
That's okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And I am no exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I grew up in an Army family, so I was an Army brat. I moved around every 3 years. So what I think that brought to me as a child was a lot of structure, right?
Mm.
So these are the drill sergeant. Dad was alive and well in my family.
Wow.
And I also saw the work ethic, right? Grinding it daily,
Mm-hmm.
day in, day out. And so, I was the first to go to college in my family, and I got scholarships and ended up going and getting my computer science degree.
Okay.
And so, and when I did that, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? What I saw was you go get a job. So back in those days,
Mm-hmm.
I went and I got a job with Xerox.
Okay.
And back in the 90s, Xerox and IBM were the two big players
Yeah.
nationwide,
Yeah.
worldwide at that time. And now they're not so big,
No.
but you got to go and do the corporate thing. So I went to corporate America to begin my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized maybe probably 10 years into that wasn't for me.
Okay.
And so I guess what happened was every 5 years or so, I would get laid off. So they would give me a big package to go away. And I was a smart guy, so I
Mm-hmm.
did my job well, but I always thought there's an easier, better way of doing this. So why don't we
Mm-hmm.
do it this way? Corporate America does not like that. And
Yeah.
so they kind of have their structure and away they go. And one of the packages I received, they gave me career counseling to get ready for another job.
Right.
And what they did say, the counselor said, you know what, Jeff, in looking at all your Myers-Briggs and your what you want to do and where your strengths are, you actually shouldn't go work for anyone else. You should start your own business. And I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
I have no
It's a
idea how to do
refreshingly
that.
honest assessment from a career counselor.
Absolutely not what I was expecting at
Yeah.
all. Since I grew up in an army family, I never knew any entrepreneurs. I
Yeah.
didn't know anyone like who had a business. So this was not in my DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, what do I do? And they're like, you have two options. You can go the franchise or you can get a business opportunity. And so with that, I decided, you know what? I was in IT and finance, and you kind of make your way through those cycles in corporate
Mm-hmm.
America. I would do a business opportunity, which was pay $25,000, and they taught me how to set up an equipment leasing brokerage. So I did that. So
Hmm.
right out of computer science degree doing financing of equipment.
What kind of
And
equipment?
well, I did anything, right? Because I was open. But what
Yeah.
I discovered very quickly was if I financed a doctor, I got paid very quickly and they got approved very quickly.
Hmm.
So I did these two deals. They were, say, $100,000 piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor basically had to sign his name and was approved like within day. And the non physician or the non-healthcare provider, they would be asking for, oh, 3 years tax returns and just
Wow.
this information and that information. It was just so more difficult. And
Hmm.
one of the things I do is, I never realized it back then, but I'm a simplifier. I do
Hmm.
everything. I just naturally think of the easiest way to do the most complicated stuff.
Hmm.
And I also had to provide for my family.
Hmm.
So it was way easier to finance a healthcare provider than
Hmm.
it was a non-healthcare provider. So that's where I went. And 22 years ago, I specialized in healthcare. So I
Okay.
did cosmetic centers, surgical centers, private
Hmm.
practices. And so that's where I kind of started.
Hmm.
And with that, what was interesting, after 2, 3 years of that, a lot of the docs and providers would say, well, I want to go into aesthetics, right? Because my patients are asking me, I want to learn how to do Botox and I want to do laser hair removal and these aesthetic procedures.
Hmm.
And how do I do that? And I'm like, well, I help these doctors here around the country. Why don't you just go talk to them and
Hmm.
they'll tell you what they did and
Hmm.
good luck. And,
Yeah.
that wasn't what I did. I was the financing guy.
Hmm.
And then after about a year of that, those doctors are like, Jeff, stop sending people to me because I do not have time to talk to all these people. So
Hmm.
then the light bulb went off. I'm like, maybe I'll talk to all these physicians and healthcare providers and I'll
Hmm.
find out what they did. And
Hmm.
then I actually created a training program 18
Hmm.
years ago on how to do that.
Hmm.
And so one thing I guess my guide is I follow the money, right?
Yeah.
I went into finance and it was way easier to get healthcare providers finance than non. So boom, I moved over there. And
Hmm.
then there was nowhere for healthcare providers to learn how to do aesthetics. So I created that as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
And one thing I learned is, and this is a tip for any of your providers, you may think you want to get into Botox because that's the big word.
Hmm.
That's the least profitable procedure.
Hmm.
You do not make any money in Botox. You literally have to see 1,000 patients a year to make like 100,000. It's way too difficult to
Yeah.
make a big living doing that. You're
Hmm.
grinding it. And most
Hmm.
providers want to stop the grind. So
Hmm.
don't do that. So at the very beginning, I did include Botox training, but I also included the non-invasive training with
Hmm.
chemical peels, microdermabrasion, because those have a 90% profit, where Botox has like a 20% profit. So
Interesting.
my business brain is all about, yeah, do the procedures you like to do,
Hmm.
but make sure you're making money at it. And
Sure.
how can you bundle things to make money at it as well?
Sure.
And then funny thing, I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then I actually my family physician friend of mine who delivered all my kids and was
Hmm.
kind of in there, we opened up a practice together. And so we
Okay.
were 50-50 owners. I
Hmm.
did the business stuff, she did the healthcare stuff,
Hmm.
but she had a full-time job and so did I. And we're like, okay, how are we going to set this practice up?
Hmm.
And so this is actually kind of the keys. So looking
Okay.
backwards from today, how do you create a multi-million-dollar practice that runs without you
Hmm.
and you can fire yourself from it?
Hmm.
We actually found it by accident. And what we were doing
Those are always the
was,
best ones, you
I
know?
know, right? Like this was not on purpose. We were
Yeah.
not smart enough to know this is how you do it.
Right.
Um, but she's busy and I'm busy. So we hired a nurse to do the procedures.
Hmm.
And we started with one nurse.
Hmm.
And when she got too busy, we hired a second one and then a third one. And now we have five, right? And
Hmm.
we're open 6 days a week into evenings. So we have to have that coverage.
Hmm.
But the whole key was I would work maybe an hour a month in that practice, and my
Wow.
partner would work 3 hours a month. So that
Wow.
was it. Like it
Okay.
was all because we were already busy. So we didn't have the time.
Hmm.
And then we look back and we're like, oh my goodness, we created a retirement program for us. Like this is like an ATM,
Hmm.
generates money whether we're there or not.
Hmm.
And that is kind of the basis of what we teach at the IPAM. And one of the things I founded was the IAPAM, which is the International Association for Providers in Aesthetic Medicine.
Okay.
And there is kind of where we kind of teach everything and the hands-on. And I
Hmm.
was doing that as well with the business.
Hmm.
So one of my big tips is when you're hiring someone, always hire someone who makes you money. Okay. I
Hmm.
didn't hire a receptionist first. I hired a provider who can actually see patients and
Hmm.
get paid.
Right.
And as an extra bonus, if it's non-insurance based procedures, you get paid cash, right?
Even
Like
better.
Visa,
Yeah.
American Express, you know, you don't
What a
have to deal with
concept.
insurance companies.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit of kind of, so was I a genius? No, it was like 20 years in the making. I figured all
Yeah.
this out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how the journey through the practice went.
Okay. What's is it Parkinson's rule? There's a rule that says, the amount of work you have, it will grow to fill the time you give it. So I love that whether by design or by accident, you just super constrained yourselves. Say, we only have, I don't know, 2 hours a week. So how can we do this? It makes you think differently than if you say I have 25 hours a week, it just sort of opens up your mind. So give us like the nuts and bolts of kind of what you describe. Like, don't give away the farm, obviously, but just kind of get us started because it's a shorter form podcast episode. But what are the nuts and bolts of this? And then the next question is what kind of mindset you have to have, because there's some big changes that people need to confront, even if the outcome is amazing. Change is hard. So nuts, like, how do you do this?
Yeah, well, in the last 20 years, I've trained 15,000 healthcare providers,
Okay.
and many of them are exactly where your listener is. They're grinding it in their day job,
Hmm.
whatever that is. Could
Hmm.
be working in a hospital, could have their own private physical therapy practice, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And so what you need to do, your big mind shift is this is the rich don't work for hours. They don't trade hours for dollars.
Hmm.
And when you're in that type of a practice, you want to think outside the box on how you can get out of that. The key is to find someone else that can do this. And
Hmm.
I have this kind of concept I call who, not you. So,
Hmm.
who's going to do this, not you? Now,
Hmm.
you may bring in a junior therapist or a provider, you may bring in a partner, or you can bring in ancillary people as well
Hmm.
that can do the procedures like we did,
And,
right?
and,
So
and we're
what's
talking
interesting.
here like the aesthetics procedures that you were kind of referring to before, right? This is
Yeah, but it could be a medical assistant, it could
okay.
be an esthetician if we're doing aesthetics, or it could be even a receptionist. Like,
Okay.
let's leverage our receptionists
Hmm.
because they can often do consultations and they're often on the phone doing them anyways.
Hmm.
So let's make that. So for me, my providers, we didn't hire receptionists up front. All the providers knew how to answer the phone and do the procedures.
Hmm.
So they did everything. So if
Hmm.
one was sick, it didn't matter. We had it all covered.
Right.
So when you're new, you just want to make sure everybody's cross trained to make sure
Hmm.
they can do everything in the practice. Now, there may be a scope of practice limitation, right? So if you have a receptionist, they may not be able to do a procedure, but
Right.
often they can do the initial consultation, right? And
Hmm.
find out what the patient's looking for, take the payment, follow up with emails, do
Hmm.
that type of marketing stuff that's so important after you get the patient in.
Okay.
So that is one of the first things you want to look at. And
Okay.
the mind shift is this, it's who, not you. So your goal is to fire yourself from your business.
Hmm.
And my latest book is called Fire Yourself First.
Hmm.
And it really is a mindset because I was grinding it. I
Hmm.
have 5 businesses and I was probably working 60, 70 hours a week. And I'm
Hmm.
like, why am I doing this?
Hmm.
And I set something in stone, and this kind of made me do the mind shift change. I said, you know what? I am no longer going to work more than 10 days a month on these 5 businesses. So what do I need to do for that to happen?
Hmm.
Now, luckily, I went back to the practice because I actually did it 12 years ago, or yeah, 12 years ago by accident. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, I need to set people in. They have
Hmm.
to know what winning looks like. I'm going to set up what success looks like in the role, the
Hmm.
requirements for everyone in all my businesses. And then I will just get weekly KPIs or numbers where I can kind of know where we're headed. So
Right.
whether we're headed up or down, leading versus lagging indicators.
Hmm.
So some real basic stuff that you can learn from your CPA or your bookkeeper, or you can buy my book.
So
I have a whole chapter on that.
so the basic concept is I am provide, I'm a practice owner. I don't know what's a good example. I'm a pediatrician, and you're talking about adding additional services to the practice that are ideally they're outside of insurance. They're um, they can be performed by a provider, whether it's hired or not, but not you. And I mean, this sounds should the services you offer they should kind of make sense that a pediatrician would offer, or is it just sort of bolt something on completely and almost like what do you recommend there? I think the default is why would a pediatrician should offer X, or it would make sense if they offered that.
Yeah, and pediatrician, is interesting.
I
Pediatricians
just
can be
pulled that
very
out.
successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to think about who brings the kids to the pediatrician, the
Oh, there you
moms,
go. Okay.
right? So there's your market. Like I know one practice, they do acne therapy and they do for children,
Mm-hmm.
but while the children are doing that, the moms are getting makeovers and Botox and laser procedures at the same time. So they do really
Interesting.
well. So
Okay.
it's interesting, just because you're pediatrics doesn't mean you don't capture something. So where is the
That's
connection?
creative. I don't think I would have thought it's very creative. Yeah.
And there always is. I'll tell you a big thread that goes through almost every single provider there
Mm-hmm.
is a medically supervised weight loss program.
Mm.
Especially it doesn't matter if you're an orthopedics or you're a pediatrician or you're a physical therapist or a
Yeah.
mental therapist, like you are going to like weight is a big issue in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Right. And now we have a lot of options that are available,
Mm-hmm.
and most are not now covered under insurance. So they're
Mm-hmm.
non-insurance ones. Like we've probably heard of Ozempic and
Mm-hmm.
Wegovy, and now there's the new Zepbound as
Right.
well. So offering medical weight loss, and it's interesting, our medical weight loss training program, our online one, is our biggest selling program right now. It now
Hmm.
outsells Botox. So it's very interesting because it applies to almost every
It really
practice of
does.
medicine.
Yeah. It really does. Okay. So part of the nuts and bolts is just the creativity and thinking through who comes in the door and how could we help them.
Yeah. And you
Right.
always want to think who can help them, not you. You may start off helping them, but
Yeah.
you always want to think about who can I bring in to offload this so
Yeah.
that now I can do more.
Yeah.
Because exactly what you said, I work 10 days a month. I get as much done in 10 days a month as I did when I worked 30 days a month.
Yeah.
Same amount. Because when you work 10 days, you really kind of it's almost like every Wednesday is a Friday before you go on your family vacation. You are like thinking clearly. You're getting
Mm-hmm.
bang, 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 because
Mm-hmm.
you can't do it tomorrow. You've got
Yeah.
to do it today.
Yeah.
So that mind shift, so
Yeah.
whatever it is, maybe you work 30 days and you want to go down to 20 days. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good start. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go from 30 to 10. I
Yeah.
went from 30 to 25 to 20 to
Right.
15. Probably took me 6 months to get that done.
Right. Yeah, and so I want to dig into the mindset shifts because, who not you, who not how is the way I've heard it. I think there's a book called that. But yeah, if you
Yep.
are, if you're listening to this and you're Dr. X and you're thinking about this and you think you're going to do it, but you're already scrapped for time, I think your idea is dead on arrival because by definition, you don't have any time to do this. And so you need to think about, I want to do this, but I need other people to do it and start to go down that path. And that's a big change for people. Part of the provider mindset is they're the doers. I mean, they're the ones treating the patients. They're the one writing up all the documentation. Like the reflex could be without even thinking about it. How do I give this to other people when I do everything? Like I have to do it. So is that like talk about what are some things that you've seen about people who kind of get in their own way with it wouldn't work because or just the things that have to change in their mind.
That's pretty much everybody, right? So
Yeah.
if that's what you feel like, you're absolutely, you do understand that, and you have to let go,
Hmm.
right? And so this is really tough. So why should I let go? If you're just thinking in terms of your practice and what your day to day is, you actually get in this hamster wheel and you just can't see beyond that.
Hmm.
And actually, like in my Fire Yourself First book, the first chapter is to get clear on a personal purpose. And this has nothing to do with your existing practice.
Hmm.
When you have that bigger purpose, that you're going to in 5, 10, 20, 30 years could be spending more time with your family, doing whatever you want, but has nothing to do with the practice. You need to
Hmm.
be clear on that. And then
Hmm.
you start working backwards. What do I need to do that? Well, if
Hmm.
I want to be semi retired, working 10 days a month and the other 20 on a beach in Belize,
Yeah.
then I have to have providers in the practice doing things.
Hmm.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
Maybe you want 5 locations, maybe you just want the one, and it's the big destination
Yeah.
practice that everybody goes to. You can choose to do whatever you want.
Hmm.
And so now start thinking about backwards, where in order to get to that beach, or in order to get to that family time that you don't have any longer, or
Hmm.
you haven't had for years,
Yeah.
like that is where you need to look at.
Yeah.
Once you just make the commitment that that's really important for you, then what'll happen is you will actually start to see a bit clearer. So there's like everything's kind of out of focus 20 years out, but things start to come back into
Yeah.
focus when you realize you don't have to do everything yourself.
Would you say uh, um, uh, the clarity of purpose? One example could be, I want to stay private, and the reason I bring that up is because you know it's not easier. I mean, reimbursement does not grow maybe ever unless you can negotiate it. But then it's that depends if you're like your expenses go up every year, but reimbursement rarely follows suit, and it just feels like the private pack practice it's just it's not hasn't burst at the seams, but man, those seams are getting stretched a bit more every year. And so, you can see more patients, you can get more efficient on your expenses, or you can add a new revenue stream, which is what we're talking about. But would you say that's a like a good clarity of purpose? Hey, look, I just want to stay private. Or is that
Well, and
missing the
it's interesting.
boat?
Yeah, no, like it was interesting. 20 years ago, when we had providers come to our training, it was, oh, my patients are aging and they want to, get Botox. And then probably about 10, 12 years ago, I would say the majority are reimbursements have gone down
Mm-hmm.
dramatically, and they've
Mm-hmm.
never gone back up. And you know what? You're working harder than you've ever worked before
Mm-hmm.
for less money than you've ever worked before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where I think of diversification. And
Yeah.
most people think of diversification in their IRA, their Roth, their retirement funds. It's like, oh, I'll
Yeah.
have some equities, I'll have some bonds, have some real estate. But how many providers have no diversification in their practice? It's all Medicare, Medicaid insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And if that anything happened there, they're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I want you to start thinking about whatever your
Mm-hmm.
practice is, what ancillary service can you bring that is not covered by insurance?
Yeah.
I do not do anything that's covered by insurance.
Yeah.
That is like, no. And there's a lot of interesting things. You think about travel vaccinations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
yellow fever, you're going to Thailand, not covered by health insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff. Or look at doing a concierge practice
Mm-hmm.
where you have a monthly fee to
Mm-hmm.
get access to you quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's a 3 or 6 month wait for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there, you want to get the most successful people have actually, unfortunately, stopped seeing Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance patients
Yeah.
and moved to cash, even for health services. So
Right.
it's a big decision. So I don't
Yeah.
want you to drop everything, but maybe
Yeah.
start. What can you carve off 10% of your entire patient load
Mm-hmm.
that's not insurance covered,
Mm-hmm.
that these patients pay? And then just every year you want to expand that
Yeah.
more and more and more. So you're eventually out of the insurance game.
Yeah. Or it's better balanced, or you have more control, or your own practice isn't bursting at the seams. It's funny. We started this saying, how do you work? How do you make more and work less? And so, but the path along it, I think we've added to it, um, add a private pay revenue stream or streams because they can help you survive. And I love your example of, while the kids are in, the parents could benefit from something too. That makes a lot of sense. Um, Anything else? I don't want to leave the mindset shift. I mean, change is big, change is hard. Is there anything else that jumps to mind with those that you've coached and taught, where they say, it's just there's some common blockage they put up in front of themselves that they should just get rid of?
Yeah. And, first of all, they have to acknowledge the blockage isn't really their fault. This is how they were trained.
Hmm.
It's the system,
Hmm.
right? And I went and I got my college degree, and I'll tell you, by the time I graduated, almost all the software I learned didn't exist. Like it was,
Yeah.
so things. just because you're taught a certain way and
Hmm.
this is how you should set up a practice doesn't mean that's how you have to do it.
Hmm.
Right. It may have worked 30 years ago when actually reimbursements paid you
Yeah.
on time within a reasonable amount of time, not 6 months and half because you didn't dot an I and stroke a T.
Yeah.
Right. We want to get away from that and bring the control back to you.
Hmm.
And so if this is tough, then that's normal because we have to kind of undo everything. So what
Yeah.
you'd really have to realize is the way you've been taught in school and the way other past providers did set up their practice, that's not necessarily the best way.
Hmm.
And it's not the smart way. It's like if you do what everyone else does, you get what everyone else gets,
Yes.
right? So if the
Yes.
majority of Americans are grinding it out in jobs they hate, which is what it is,
Hmm.
then why would I follow that? I
Yeah.
want to do something different, right?
Hmm.
So that's where I'm like, okay, where's the multi-million dollar practice, right? That
Hmm.
has one provider and 10 ancillary staff in there doing stuff. That's who you want to emulate. And you know
Hmm.
what? You talked about 80/20. That's your 20%. You
Yeah.
want to hone into the 20% who've got this figured out already.
Yeah.
And it may not be in your city. So maybe you're in Detroit, right? So if you Google the best provider in Miami, you may actually see how they've got things set up. So
Hmm.
kind of do some research and give you some ideas. I think once you see, oh, this person's doing it, the same background that I have,
Hmm.
but they have 15 ancillary people doing all these procedures so they don't have to, and they're writing books and they're speaking and they're doing all these great things. How did they
Hmm.
do that?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm look at how others have done it and then just copy them.
You're so right about, how they were taught. I had a guest on a couple of years ago who said, Carl, in medical school, they never came out and said earning money from treating patients is bad and ugly and dirty, but you got that message loud and clear. And so now here we are talking about, not even charging for the treating the kids if you're a pediatrician. We're talking about adding other stuff. It makes me think of, maybe the part of the mindset is instead of telling yourself, oh, we couldn't do that, why don't you say something like, why not us? Why couldn't we do that?
Yeah.
If it seems reasonable and it fits our values and it's why not us? Maybe it could be us, and just don't shut it down right away. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
the
No,
don't make
one
money.
thing,
Go ahead.
no, one thing that you really need to be clear about is that you, all of your listeners went into medicine, whatever specialty they have, to help people.
Hmm.
And so when you're expanding, you're helping people. So
Right.
your entire focus
Maybe not
should
the
be to
people you
provide
first
the
thought
best.
about, but why not? You know?
Absolutely. Like, let's talk about Botox and laser procedures and all that for just a second here.
Mhm.
Now, that seems like, oh my goodness, like really, you're doing Botox so the
Right.
person doesn't have this. You know what? We're in mental health because nobody needs Botox, but
Hmm.
something bothers them. Something happened in their childhood. Someone said something to them, and they actually bring that to them, their life 40 years later. You helping them remove some wrinkles here is life changing for them.
Hmm.
So you're doing,
Don't prejudge
some
it.
procedures. Yeah, you have to really look at how are you helping that patient.
Hmm.
And so by adding ancillary services to your existing practice that are cash pay, you're actually helping your patient. You should do it always to help the patient.
Hmm.
The money will come. So just don't be afraid of charging for it,
Hmm.
right? And women know this, but when I found out how much women spent on hair and nails,
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, I am never not going to second things charging $300 for an aesthetic procedure,
Yeah.
right? Like this is, come on, they're over there spending it. When they
Yeah.
pull their Prada bag on your counter and say they don't have $25 for the copay,
I
but they
know.
had 3 grand for the bag, or they're driving a
Yeah, I
Mercedes,
was just gonna
this is
say.
your patient,
Yeah.
right? So they have the money.
Yeah.
Some of it's in healthcare, I'm entitled to it, and others, me money. You
Hmm.
need to get me money because that's where Prada, Louis Vuitton, Mercedes is all in me money. There's no limited budget there.
Yeah.
So get out of that mindset of the health care. I'm entitled to it. It should be free. I shouldn't have to pay a copay, and
Hmm.
set your practice up as in you're helping the patient.
Yeah. And I'm immoral if I charge more. I'm a jerk. I shouldn't do. I'm not allowed to do that. I mean, look around. Others are doing it and they're not immoral jerks. Why would you be if you did? Just challenge that and
Yeah,
sit with
it's
that for a
market.
while. Maybe you'd be like, you know what? I'm
Yeah.
not an immoral jerk if I would do that. Yeah. So,
No, not at all.
yeah.
You should be able to put your kids through the colleges that they want to do. If you want to help your kids buy their first home because things are just so more unaffordable now, you should have the right to do all of that.
Hmm.
And so do not hesitate. And I think when you go around and you find out what other providers are charging,
Hmm.
it'll actually ease your mind. And I'm like, yeah, this is normal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The market will pay it. Absolutely. I love it. This is even more. I expected this to be eye-opening. This is more eye-opening than I even anticipated. I love this. Couple of wrap-up questions I ask every guest to try to keep us on the more size of advice. First one is anything you think I should have asked you or anything we should have talked about that we didn't?
Um, One thing I do cover in my book
Mhm.
that we never covered here is hiring people can be very daunting and scary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I've hired everyone in the past from psychopaths and liars to A players that were amazing,
Okay.
right? So in my 20, 30 years, like I've hired them all.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a free download to your listeners, if they
Mm-hmm.
go to my book's webpage,
Okay.
fireyourselffirst.com,
Okay.
they can actually download my 11-step hiring guide.
Okay.
And it has all the questions I ask and the process.
Mm-hmm.
And since I did that, my hiring, I haven't let anyone go, right? It's just been amazing, right?
Okay.
When I post for a nursing position, I'll get 300 applicants,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it is like you want to be the place people want to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is very, and just something that you're like,
Yeah.
okay, this is great. I have to hire people, but how? Like I just,
Yeah, nobody
just
has
check it
fun
out.
stories about that these days, right? It's all horror
No,
stories. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
getting
and
better, but yeah. Mhm.
fireyourselffirst.com, I could see it's in the show notes for the episode, so that'll be in there. Anybody who wants it, that's a place to find it. So hire, yeah, big deal. We could have spent the whole episode on that one.
Absolutely.
Not a quick answer. The other wrap-up question I ask every guest is, okay, we've caught somebody's attention. They're like, Jeff's right. Jeff's right. They're enthusiastic, but they don't know where to start. Sometimes people get stuck at the starting line, especially if it's a new concept. Give us one or two super simple things they could do to nudge themselves off the starting line and get going.
Yeah, and one thing you need to open your kind of eyes, and I want you thinking about what else could you add to your practice.
Mm-hmm.
So you may want to check out like another website is the iapam.com's website. Take
Okay.
a look at all the different courses that they offer
Mm-hmm.
and see how would that work with my practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that you can actually kind of think outside the box. And as well, I want you to Google somebody who's in your practice field in a big city, maybe Manhattan, LA, wherever, and
Mm-hmm.
get some ideas of how they're adding other procedures as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see that and understand that, it'll be so, this big weight will become off
Yeah.
because you'll see, oh, this is an idea. I think
Yeah.
this works for me. And
Yeah.
this is the time to do the procedures you want to do.
Yeah.
This is the time for you. Because if you're not healthy, you can't help your patients.
Mm-hmm.
So always, you want to help them, but help yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Like start building a list of ideas. Look at other providers that do what you do all over the country. Are any of them doing that? What are they doing? And then you can talk to them. Another one is look at all the patients that walk through your door and start to group them a bit. Don't we have all these patients? See if you can break them down into a few subgroups as long as they're big enough. And then look at a subgroup and go, do they need anything else? How's their health? What else might they benefit from? And then just start building a list and go from there. I love it. That's great advice. Thank you. And thank you for coming on Practice Care. Like I've already said, this has been great. It's been awesome. It's been even more than I expected, and I expected a lot. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, it was a pleasure being here, and I just hope I helped some people.
I'll bet you did, and me as well. Couple of points before we wrap up. First, all the contact info that Jeff gave to me is going to be in the show notes for the episode. Fire Yourself First, iapam.com, a couple of others. So if you want to get a hold of Jeff, this is another way to do it. That's first. Second, if you are someone like Jeff or someone like us that seeks to serve private practice owners, or if you're one yourself and you've got some experience experience on the business side of private practice, either way, we want you to come on PracticeCare and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Jeff's episode, every episode, there's a link, couple of clicks. It's easy. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled ASAP. And finally, please subscribe to PracticeCare. Just search PracticeCare, one word. You'll find us. We're everywhere, every platform, YouTube. The easiest way to stay up to date with new episodes, which come every week, is to subscribe. So please do that if you haven't done so already. Thanks very much. And until next time.